Will the Dodgers have to move on from Teoscar Hernandez? And if they do, what are those options? And also, bye bye, Walker Buehler. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. This is a daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. And you can help yourself out in that regard by subscribing to get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live here on YouTube. If you are subscribed, you got a notification, probably a little bit different time than normal. Going live here on Monday morning. Jeff was not able to join us today. If this is your first time listening, my name is Vince Samperio, usually joined by a host, Jeff's co-host, Jeff Snyder. Jeff and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, and we've been covering the team for a decade now in a few different capacities, and we've been doing this podcast here for 7 of those years. So, a lot of Dodger talk and thoughts and feelings and everything else. And, yeah, Jeff couldn't go today. I ended up falling asleep on the couch. So, wake up to the news this morning that Walker Buehler is signing with the Red Sox. We'll talk about that later, but we did get some reports over the weekend about the Dodger talks with Teoscar Hernandez at an impasse. Ken Rosenthal reported that, talks have kind of stalled a little bit, and then had an article kind of laying out the other options the Dodgers are exploring, most of which ones we've already talked about or talked about a little bit. But I wanted to talk about, a little bit about Teo first. And, I do think, Jeff is probably more confident than I'd be with this. In terms of Teoscar Hernandez still going to be a Dodger. I do think that this is, the Teos camp wants one thing, the Dodgers want one thing, and, they're just going to who blinks first type of deal. But it is interesting that Rosenthal mentioned that the years weren't an issue between the two sides. It was the money. And if that's the case, I think it's just it feels like the Dodgers are just being hard in their negotiations, because obviously if it was not a matter of years but just money, then why wouldn't the Dodgers just give them the extra few million, especially coming off a World Series title and him being a big part of why the Dodgers won that World Series title. But again, we're not in the negotiations, we're not part of any of this. These could be reports from people that have different ulterior motives, like we talked about before. Like, agents can say stuff to media members to gain one kind of reaction, and teams can, team officials can maybe leak stuff to media members for another reaction. And, here it just does seem like somebody's, trying to get that the other side to blink. And yeah, it sucks as fans to kind of see the negotiation play out, especially if we take all these reports for face value. And it's like, the Dodgers, why not just give him the, 72, 80 million or whatever it is that Teoscar wants? But again, they're going to have their negotiations. The Dodgers have their thoughts in mind. And, who are we to go against that or judge that at the moment? So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Teoscar Hernandez this offseason, and obviously we want him back as a Dodger, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. But the Dodgers do have some other options, some of those that were laid out by Ken Rosenthal in the article. Some we've talked about in the past, some we've talked about this specific offseason. The names that he mentioned were Ha-Seong Kim, which is obviously not an outfielder, but somebody that can play the infield, that could push someone to the outfield or push the Dodgers to make another move. The other one was Luis Robert Jr., with the White Sox, and then Seiya Suzuki with the Cubs. We talked a little bit about those guys. We've talked about Luis Robert before in the past. We talked a little bit about Seiya Suzuki in this offseason when we thought about what could the Cubs trade him, and would it make sense for the Dodgers? And I'll start with Kim, because obviously with Ha-Seong Kim, it's not directly filling a need. It's one of those where you're adding an infielder and then you have to decide what to do. Like, I don't know if it's as simple as Ha-Seong Kim signs and is expected to be the Dodgers shortstop, and then, Mookie Betts moves back to right field once, Kim is ready to go. He's expected to miss some time to start the season. Like, is it as simple as that? Probably not. It's knowing that, the Dodgers and kind of the commitment they've said for Mookie Betts going back to the infield. But, is it as simple as Ha-Seong Kim play second base, Gavin Lux now becomes trade bait, and that's how they get another outfielder? I suppose that's possible. Like, it is possible that they get Kim and Suzuki, or Kim and Luis Robert Jr. Like, that's entirely plausible, especially if, they do end up using Lux as a trade chip, or somebody, in that realm as a trade chip. That's very much possible. But, for Ha-Seong Kim, yeah, it makes sense for the Dodgers to have good players, and Ha-Seong Kim is a good player. Most of his value, or not most, a lot of his value comes from the defensive side for the most part. He's had 2 above average seasons offensively, slightly above average, but above average nonetheless. 22 and 23 with the Padres. He had an OPS plus of 105 and 107. So there's some value there. He's won a Gold Glove, and that's where a lot of the value is going to come from. Obviously, offensively, he can be good, but that's not what you're counting on. You're counting on him to be a presence at the bottom of the lineup, but he's not someone that could maybe be near the top of the lineup and be counted on for too much. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Dodgers to be exploring this route. Again, we don't know exactly how much time he's supposed to miss at the start of the season. That makes things maybe a little bit different, but with the Dodgers having plenty of guys that can play the infield, let's just say in this world where they sign Ha-Seong Kim, Gavin Lux is traded. They have Miguel Rojas. They have, Chris Taylor at the moment. They could have Kike Hernandez if they decide to bring him back, all to play the infield. So it's not a matter of missing that. It's just a matter of making the pieces fit. And, for Kim, you're losing a lot offensively in terms of if this is an option instead of Teoscar Hernandez. If you get Ha-Seong Kim and you don't sign Teoscar Hernandez and you don't get one of the other guys mentioned or somebody else, then yeah, it's a pretty big downgrade in terms of offense. It's a little bit of an upgrade in terms of defense. And I'm not sure I'm ready to make that type of trade-off at the moment. I would imagine, again, if Kim is one of those options the Dodgers are thinking about, it's in addition to something else. And I got to imagine that's the Dodgers thinking, because, again, that's a big enough downgrade offensively to where it doesn't make much sense. Now, if the Dodgers are going to put some trust in young guys, let's just say Tommy Edman, hey, you play center field, and Michael Conforto, you play left field for the most part, and hey, Andy Pages, you can hold down right field, and, somewhere else, other people fit in there in terms of platoons and everything else. Not the way I would go, especially considering the way that Andrew Friedman spoke this offseason in terms of not wanting to go into the season knowing that you're going to have to make a trade at the deadline. Like, if that's really what they're talking about, then yeah, you're going to make all these different moves in order to get what you need for the team to really only need the deadline for injuries or for, a couple extra pieces on top. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to talk about Luis Robert Jr. and Seiya Suzuki a little bit more. We'll talk about Walker Buehler signing with the Red Sox in the last segment. So, make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel is America's number one sports book. And with the NFL playoffs almost here, it's not too late to get in on the regular season action because FanDuel right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Yeah, not 150, $250 in bonus bets. You place one $5 bet, that $5 bet wins. Boom, you got $250 to put on whatever you want, or wait for the NFL postseason, wait for the regular MLB regular season, whatever you want to do. That's what you can do with FanDuel. And FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W because you can bet on things as simple as this team will beat this team. You can bet on things as simple as this player will score a touchdown. This player will not score a touchdown. This team will score this many points. This team will score less than this many points. There's so much to get into, and it's all on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. So make sure to go download it and check it out. And go to FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. If you're listening live today, it might be your first listen of the day. If you, are someone that follows, it might be your last listen, your second listen, whatever it is. We appreciate you all listening, and we appreciate you that are everydayers. Those are people that watch and listen every single day. There's definitely people here in the chat on YouTube at 7:51 Pacific time. So we appreciate you guys for hopping on. And remember, if you're on YouTube, you can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles. Those are two 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you the biggest news and stories from the sports world and the LA sports world. And let's get right back into talking about these other options if the Dodgers don't sign Teoscar Hernandez. One of those options mentioned was Seiya Suzuki. Seiya Suzuki is someone that we've talked about a little bit before, maybe not as in depth, but someone that, looking at the numbers, makes a lot of sense for the Dodgers. It's not quite the power numbers that you get with Teoscar Hernandez, but it's pretty darn good in terms of overall offense. I mean, you look at Seiya Suzuki's been in the big leagues 3 seasons now. He's got an OPS plus of 128 total. He's maxed out at 21 home runs, but he hasn't played more than 138 games in a season yet so far. So, there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say durability issues. He's played 138, 132. That's, a couple injuries, a couple of days off here and there. And, you're close enough. And obviously the Dodgers know how to deal with injuries anyways. But I think for Suzuki, it's one of those where, yeah, it makes sense for the Dodgers. He's not a free agent until after the 2027 season. So he's got 3 more years or 2 more years, 3 more years before he can become a free agent. So that's obviously going to be a big part of it. Now, in the report, Ken Rosenthal did say the Cubs aren't for sure trading him, but, after getting Kyle Tucker, there's not really a spot for him in the outfield. There's been reports that he doesn't want to be a full-time DH. So, if that's going to be an issue, that's why the Cubs will want to move him. The Cubs should be trying to keep all talent there to try to win their division. But, some teams just operate differently or operate based on how the players around them move. So, but yeah, Suzuki, again, defensively, the numbers aren't there. He's not great defensively. He's not terrible. He's just kind of there. But I remember him missing the fly ball there in the 2023 season that effectively took there's a lot of games you lose over the course of a season, but the Cubs finished 1 game out of the postseason. The D-backs made the postseason. The Dodgers might have not got swept in 2023 if Seiya Suzuki had made that catch. But either way, regardless of all that, that's just the way things go sometimes. But yeah, Suzuki, he makes sense. He's a guy that plays a position they're looking for, which is a right fielder. There is a guy that is above average offensively. It is a guy that, could probably benefit. You're always going to think that guys can benefit from being in a longer lineup. Like if Seiya Suzuki's counted on to be one of the main offensive forces for the Cubs, well, with the Dodgers, he's in that middle tier. He's not Ohtani or Betts or Freeman. he's in that next year with him and Will Smith and, Max Muncy, those type of guys. So I got to imagine that helps out. Protection in the lineup would be a little bit different because he'd probably bat, fourth, fifth, sixth. So it's not necessarily about protection, but he would have probably a lot more chances for runners on base. He's tapped out at 74 RBI. Now, RBI aren't necessarily a stat that, counts for too much because, one guy with 100 RBIs could have had 200 more plate appearances with runners in scoring position than a guy with, 75 RBIs with better offensive numbers. So it's just a matter of that. And that's kind of maybe where Suzuki's at. I mean, he's at, he's hit well. He's been WRC plus, 118 or above the entire 3 years of his career. So offensively, this makes sense. I don't know what it would cost, and I don't really have a thought of what it would cost to trade for him, especially with, the 3 years of control and, the flaws. Obviously, the Cubs would be in a weird spot. Like if his agent or whoever came out and said he does not want to be an all-time or everyday DH, then what leverage do the Cubs? I guess the Cubs still have leverage, but not the leverage that they would want. So moving on, I guess ultimately my final stance on Seiya Suzuki is that offensively he makes a lot of sense. If the Dodgers can get him for cheap, go ahead. Obviously, I still have Teoscar Hernandez ahead of him on a wish list, and that's kind of where we'll leave it at that. Moving to Luis Robert Jr., who is intriguing for a few different reasons. He's, a little bit higher ceiling than Seiya Suzuki, but definitely a lower floor. I mean, you just take a look at last year with him, and he had an OPS of 657, OPS plus of 87. Yeah, he missed some games. He only played 100 games, but never quite got it going. And as we've seen, or as we've talked about with players on bad teams, it's not that you try any less. It's not that you whatever, but it's got to be draining to be on a team that the only thing they were really competing for last year was not breaking the single season record for most losses. Like it's got to be tough to be in that. You look at 2023 and he was, 12th in MVP voting, Silver Slugger, All-Star, 130 OPS plus, 38 home runs, 36 doubles. Like that's an offensive force that would fit well for the Dodgers. The thing with Luis Robert Jr. too that makes it interesting is that he can play center field and has played center field for I think the majority of his time. Yeah, he's played only center field in the big leagues. Now Tommy Edman doesn't necessarily profile as a corner outfielder, but he could. If the Dodgers go after Luis Robert Jr., like is it a matter of putting him in center, moving Edman to the infield, and then again opening up somebody for trade? That's possible. They could just stick him in right field. I mean, I doubt if he's a good center fielder, he'd be a good right fielder, and maybe that the move the Dodgers would be thinking of if they do trade for him, leave Edman out there in center field. So this one we've talked about him. He's good. I like him. It's relatively cheap. He has one more year on his current contract, and then he has team options for 2026 and 2027 at a pretty low price, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, $20 million. So $15 million in 2025, and then two $20 million options for 26 and 27. So like you're getting a guy that has been an MVP candidate, a guy that could be really, really, really good for, if you pick up those two options, you have them at $55 million for 3 years. Like that's, cheaper than what the reported amount for Teoscar is, but obviously it's going to cost you in terms of prospects. The one thing that was noted that maybe is a little different than what we've heard in other reports that Rosenthal said was that the White Sox aren't necessarily looking for a package of like prospects. They're looking for kind of one significant player I'm sure a few different players, but one of those players being a significant return. And, the Dodgers do have some of those guys that they could, put out there. And the White Sox are a team, not like, there's been other teams that we've talked about, the Brewers and teams like that, and maybe even the Cubs. Like if the Dodgers were to trade with them, they're maybe looking for major league ready or close to major league ready talent. The White Sox, they got to be deep in a rebuild. I doubt they're asking for major league ready talent. And the Dodgers, when it comes to their farm system, there's not too much major league ready talent, but there is a lot of talent that's ready to come up in the next few years. So a deal could potentially match up there. But if ultimately Luis Robert Jr., it's another yes based on cost, but I still think it's a lot easier just to go sign Teoscar Hernandez rather than trade for someone that you're hoping to relive what he's done, and you're hoping that he stays healthy. I mean, maybe moving him out of center field and into right field would help with a little bit of that health. I mean, the most he's ever played in a season is 145 games, and that was in 2023. Other than that, he's played 100 games or less in every other season, whether due to injury or getting called up late or whatever. But it's one of those things where I see a comment here about what's the obsession with Luis Robert. He's always hurt and doesn't have a great stats and everything else. Yeah, you're never gonna win a trade if you're going by the guy's lowest stats. If you're trading for a guy like Luis Robert Jr., you're going for the high end of what he is, and the high end of what he is a guy that was really, really good in 2023. Like I said, 38 homers, 36 doubles, 857 OPS, 130 OPS plus. Like, that's a legitimate guy that doesn't have to carry a team, but is a very good complementary piece. Could carry some teams, lower level teams, but for the Dodgers, a very good complementary piece. And if you're trading for him, you want that value. If you're trading for him as a Dodgers, you don't want to get him at that value, which is what kind of where he's at now, because he had a really bad 2024 season. So we will see what happens there. Ultimately, I still do think the Dodgers signed Teoscar Hernandez. I do think they're, for whatever reason, maybe Dodgers front office is bored and they're just, let's have some negotiations. But, I don't think that's the case. But, just get it done. We're close to Christmas now. I don't know if he'll sign before then. We did have a flurry of signings. Jock Peterson's going to the Rangers, Andrew McCutchen staying with the Pirates, and Walker Buehler going to the Red Sox. We're going to talk about that next. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you need if you're trying to catch live events like sporting events, theater, concerts, and comedy shows. All that is available on the Game Time app. And Game Time this winter season is focused on togetherness, because that means when you bring people together at live events, experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time can help you get those tickets in a few different ways. One of those new ways they have is Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out all that fluff, takes away all those bad seats and bad deals, and only puts the best deals in front of you, so you don't have to waste time searching through all those tickets. But beyond Game Time Picks, there's all-in pricing, so you don't have to worry about surprise fees at checkout. You can get views from your seat if you haven't been to a venue, or if you're going to sit somewhere that you don't normally sit at a venue. You can see what those it's going to look like from your seat. They got the lowest price guarantee, so you can buy without worrying, because if you find tickets in the same section and row for cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And if you do end up buying tickets, they got their best in the business customer service policy. So make sure to download the Game Time app and take the guesswork out of buying tickets. And right now, if you use code LOCKEDONMLB, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. I want to thank you for being an everydayer. In addition to being an everydayer, which is just someone that listens or watches every day, you can go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can get text directly from us with any breaking news, thoughts, rumors, all that type of stuff. All you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. All right, finishing out the episode with a goodbye and a thank you to Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler reportedly has signed or agreed to a 1-year, $21 million deal with the Red Sox. Essentially, he got the qualifying offer money from the Red Sox the 1 year. and conflicted on how to feel about it. Obviously, happy for Walker Buehler that he still ended up getting good money. Not he's betting on himself essentially with I don't know what other offers you had out there, so maybe it's not betting on yourself. It's just a matter of doing what is out there. Uh, but a chance to hit free agency again next year if he is able to continue to recover and pitch better. If he pitched the way he did in the postseason for the Red Sox in the regular season, then he might put himself onto a pretty decent payday. And obviously, that's probably what he thinks is going to happen. I'm sure he has ultimate confidence in himself in terms of doing that. I don't, you know, could the Dodgers have used him? Yes, the Dodgers could have used Walker Buehler. They could always use more pitchers, but could they, really guarantee the thing for me with Walker Buehler and the Dodgers is, could the Dodgers have used him? Yes. Could he have been a factor for the Dodgers? Yes. On Walker Buehler's side, are the Dodgers the best team to help him showcase and get paid the next offseason? Probably not. Like, realistically, Walker Buehler probably wants to make 28, 32 starts a year, wants to be able to prove that, he's back to being a dependable workhorse and pitching well. And, hopefully with the Red Sox for him, making the postseason and showing what he's always done in the postseason throughout his career. But, with the Dodgers, knowing that they have a rotation already with, Glasnow and with Yamamoto and Ohtani being there at some point, and Clayton Kershaw supposed to come back, and Blake Snell now, and some of the young guys. Yeah, Walker Buehler would for sure have a guaranteed spot in the rotation at the start of the season because the Dodgers, Ohtani may not be back at the start of the year, 6-man rotation, everything else. But is it a guarantee that he would remain in the rotation the entire year if he didn't pitch well? Not for sure, especially if the Dodgers do end up making another, signing or whatever the case is. So I think for Walker Buehler specifically, going to a team that had an absolute need for starting pitching makes the most sense for him. And that's what he did. The Red Sox they traded for Garrett Crochet. They have, guys like Bello and Tanner Hawk and different guys, but Walker Buehler could essentially cement himself as the number 2 guy behind Crochet over there if he pitches well enough and can pitch against good competition. And they ultimately it's going to showcase him, and he's obviously betting a little bit on that in terms of him being good, but it makes sense. And for the Dodgers, Walker Buehler made sense, but for Walker Buehler, maybe the Dodgers didn't make sense, and that's kind of how I'm seeing it. And in terms of pure baseball and the 2025 Dodgers, that's how I feel. In terms of Walker Buehler, I'm gonna miss the guy. He was as frustrated as we got this season, and as we called for Walker Buehler to be taken out of the rotation or to not pitch anymore for the Dodgers or to try, go to the bullpen. And luckily for us and Dodger fans, the Dodgers had enough injuries that kept Walker Buehler there. And then, Walker Buehler ultimately had to pitch in for the Dodgers in the postseason. And ultimately that's where, he really showed out. And regardless of what happened in the regular season, we're going to remember Walker Buehler and him throwing his arms up after recording the last out of the World Series, coming into pitch in relief, a day or I guess 2 nights, a day after, pitching the scoreless outing in the World Series. So, for that, we thank you for Walker Buehler. I mean, we've been doing this podcast throughout his entire career or almost his entire career. We've been doing a Dodger podcast throughout his entire career. And he was one of those guys when, even in 2018, 2017, if he would have been on the 2017 roster, could that been a little bit different because he would have been in that roster instead of Brandon McCarthy. And, maybe he doesn't give up those home runs that Brandon McCarthy gave up in game 2. But regardless of that, 2018 Walker Buehler, in 2018, I was convinced the Dodgers are going to win the World Series because of Walker Buehler. And he pitched well in the Milwaukee series. He pitched 7 shutout innings against the juggernaut Red Sox in 2018 when it seemed like no other Dodger pitcher could shut them down. He was the one that shut them down. 7 scoreless innings. He had a rough outing in his first postseason appearance, giving up not necessarily a rough outing, one rough inning, giving up the grand slam to Acuna, but still he ended up getting through 5 innings that game. Gave the Dodgers 2 starts, 11.2 innings of 3.86 ERA in the CS, and then the 7 shutout innings. And then you look at 2019. I mean, a .71 ERA and 2 starts there in that NLDS against the Nationals. Started that game 5. Should have came out the winner of that game 5, but things happen. And then 2020, obviously a .82 and a 1.5 ERA in the CS and World Series, pitching big innings for the Dodgers. And then this past offseason, when you think about the first game with the Padres didn't quite go his way, defense didn't help out, and then after that he was pretty much shut down, didn't allow a run after that. And yeah, he was a guy that had the mentality, had whatever it meant in terms of pitching in October. And as if Jeff was here, he would say, I don't believe that there's a difference or clutch gene or whatever that is, but maybe Walker Buehler did have that. And to me, I do think like there's a difference in pitching when games matter. The game 163 against the Rockies, shut them down for the Dodgers in 2018 to win the division for sure and have them avoid like the wild card game. Like that was huge. So just a thank you and a shout out to Walker Buehler. You've made us Dodger fans very happy in October, which not a lot of players or teams have done for the Dodgers. And, you capped it off the only way you could, closing it out in 2024. And we'll always have that, the arms throwing out, the run and jump with Will Smith. Like it was perfect, and we appreciate you. And good luck with the Red Sox. And hey, if the Red Sox are struggling and the Dodgers need a starting pitcher, who knows? At the trade deadline, Walker Buehler could find his way back in LA. You never know. So we appreciate you, Walker Buehler. All right. Last thing, over the weekend, we found out Rickey Henderson passed away. Rickey Henderson was one of the most dynamic players in baseball history. The man of steel, as they called him, has the all-time record for runs scored and steals, has a single season record for steals. He was a Dodger. He played his last major league game was with the Dodgers in 2003. Rickey Henderson played 30 games for the Dodgers and stole 5 bases, I think, stole 3 bases. So 3 of those steals are with the Dodgers, and 2 of his 297 home runs were with the Dodgers, and 7 of his 2,295 runs scored were with the Dodgers. Now, obviously, as a Dodger fan, you might remember him playing with the team. I was 12 years old, so I remember he was on the team. If you would have told me Rickey Henderson finished his career with the Dodgers and he was 44 years old and everything else, I probably don't remember that, but I do remember him being with the Dodgers. And even though most of his career came before I really knew what was going on in baseball, like he played through 2003, but he probably was actually he was still pretty good into his later years. But when I got to see him, he was, or when I remember, probably 5-6 years old, so 95, 90 or 96 ish. He was with a bunch of different teams. So he was just, Padres, Angels, A's, Mets, Mariners, Padres, Red Sox, Dodgers. So didn't get to see him in his heyday, but obviously one of the more, like I said, dynamic players to ever play the game, and one of the most fun personalities. You see a lot of different stories coming out, some that are, been confirmed, some that maybe haven't been confirmed, but either way, like Rickey Henderson was a really big part of baseball history, a really big part of baseball culture, and he'll be missed. And we appreciate his time with the Dodgers, and we appreciate his time in baseball and everyone that got to enjoy seeing him play. And we send all the thoughts and everything and prayers and everything else to his family and anybody grieving, the loss of Rickey Henderson. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us where we get podcasting on YouTube, You come in every day or by listening or watching every day. Subscribe to get notified when episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube. You can go beyond the podcast, come a Locked On Dodgers Insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with the Dodgers. You can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network on YouTube. You can follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter as NightDog. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, or if you're at home, tell your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.